Well, we might sort of start today. Today, I'm covering two things, and thank you for everyone for putting up with me having to shift. I've had a bit of unwellness in the last month. Well, in fact, you guys have faced a double dose. I'm a very fit person. I've never been sick in my life, and in this semester I've been sick twice. So thank you for putting up with a second change. You are the only group who's had to put up with two changes. But I'm feeling much better at the moment, which is great. For the health people in the room, I had a little dose of shingles, which is a condition that actually is the virus from chickenpox that lives in you for 50 years. Well, for me it was 55 years, 53 years, and then can come back and get you 53 years later. So unpleasant as an adult, but on the mend now. So thank you guys, really appreciate it. So we have two topics in a sense to cover today. And I think actually that's okay, because the middle topic about setting a positive culture or environment is a bit more philosophical than practical. And so I think that's probably good that I actually think, you know, obviously this is the first time we've done this. I think we've had a little learning from this journey that we might make it 3 sessions, not 4 next time, and merge the philosophy bit in with some practical. And I want to talk about setting the right culture for learning in the context of that has to, when you're setting up a course or you have new students, that starts from before even the students arrive. So my perspective on a student group is the minute they are enrolled, they're your responsibility. And that's a really important thing to take, because admin doesn't take that view. Admin takes the view, they'll sack me for saying it, but they take the view that they're not really a student until they turn up at the first class. No. What I do is I make sure when I look at the lists as people are enrolling. So in the month or 6 weeks beforehand, I look at the list, and as new people come, I will send a little email. I have a preset little email saying, hey, welcome to the course. You know, we haven't got the unit guide yet, but if you have any questions, you can ask. You set that culture of the relationship between the academic and your students. Start setting it before you even see them. I think that's really good. They see that you're a human. They sense that you have purpose. You know, too many courses I see seem to be sort of like, what would you describe it? You know, a sausage machine, you know, just like the same every semester, you know, no spirit in them. That's a really risky thing to do. Students don't like that. I suspect you've probably all been to courses like that, you know, the lecture at the bottom has got 2005 on the slides, excuse me, etc. I don't like going to lectures like that. I don't want to, and so don't inflict that upon your students. So start early, make contact, be communicative. And the other important piece about that pre-period is to set up some of your expectations. And what I mean by that is, hey, the class is on Tuesdays at 9. I'll see you at Tuesday at 9. You can do it in a friendly manner, but it still sets up, I'll see you on Tuesday at 9. And that then puts, you know, the expectation also of, please come to class. If you need them to come to class, obviously, you know, I'm thinking dental schools. You know, dental schools have this very militaristic view of the world, and you must turn up for class and things. It's different in education, it's different in other places. But always set that cultural norm of, hey, listen, you're coming to class because I will be there and I will say hello to you, and I will, if you're not there, I will notice, not because your signature's not on the sheet, that's not what I mean. I will notice because you're a person, and we are a person-to-person connection. Come in, how are you? So I try to make that person-to-person connection with my students to make sure they know that that's all right. I think I know what you're talking about because I think I saw a walk past. They know that I actually care about them. I want to see you at class, not because I'm going to test you on every word, and we're going to talk about that in a minute, but because learning is a professional job. You've joined a university to learn. So come along and learn, you know? So I think setting that early cultural norm is important. This is where often students and us as academics are 3 million kilometres apart. It's not often I would say that we are completely on different planets, but I think this is the one thing. Assessment versus learning. Now, I think educationally, people would say, well, Mark, assessment is an integral part of learning. I think we've got to the situation over the last 30 years where assessment seems to become, that's the only reason I come to class, is to work out what the assessment's going to be. You have to push that back. Now, there's many ways you can push that back, and I'm going to show you some of the techniques that I think are valuable to push that back. But at the same time, you have to acknowledge it. So, although you don't want assessment to be the only reason to come to class or to listen to my videos or whatever it might be, that's the student's probable position when they're starting. They're only doing this to get a grade, to get a GPA, to get into whatever they want to do. I spend a lot of time, those who've been in my classes will know, do you know what, it's sort of like giving away the trade secrets at the moment. I sensed this last night when I was getting this together. You know, having been in my classes, you will now know what I've been doing. You will know that it wasn't just me being random anymore. In those first interactions, put in effort to break apart the relationship between assessment and learning. Break it apart. Otherwise, the classes degenerate into. I've had students do this to me, undergraduates. Oh, Mark, those 3 slides at the beginning, will they be in the exam? Like when you get to that point, I run out of the philosophy of why am I here? You know, it must never get to that point. So a really critical piece of that is first interactions is to tease or to separate the philosophy of you are here to learn from, hey, listen, we are going to have some assessment, but don't be driven by that. Okay? So I think that's really important. Set the tone. You know, it's quite interesting, isn't it? We've done 3 weeks of practical stuff. We're going to do more today. But I actually think this is more important, the non-practical piece of setting the relationship tone with your students. Yep, break the link. Break the link. Explain to students being a student is a job. You're here to learn. It's a professional job. It has responsibilities. It means listen. You know, I get lots of amazing emails. I've had one in the last week. Hey, listen, I haven't been to any classes in the last 2 months. I gather the assessment is due on Friday. Could you tell me what it's about? Can you imagine what that does to my heart? You know, that's not a professionalism as a student. I'm just here to up my GPA or something. So you don't want that. You want to know where your students are at. Clearly we're going to do some exercise in a minute on different size classes. So clearly when you have a small class, I call a small class 50 and under. Anything under 50, you should be able to identify each person, and you should be able to go, I know that person likes cricket, that person follows soccer, whatever it might be, something that is a connection with each of those people. That's what my mentor taught me. Make sure you find a connection. Once you get above 50, it becomes very difficult. I don't know about you, but I can't hold that in my head well. And in fact, in many universities, if a class becomes above 50, they'll break it into 2 groups of 50 or smaller clusters, which makes logical sense because at about that 30 to 50 range, you can communicate with people well. I don't think modern education is moving away from 1,500 people sitting in a massive concert hall listening to a lecture. I'm not sure they are. In your generation, that will disappear. I guarantee you, that will never happen again. Cool. So I now want to move on and talk about the assessment piece. But in talking about the assessment piece, that philosophy stuff is going to come back about building a culture. The very first lecture, we work our way through the unit guide or subject guide. But you know what I do? I actually start at the assessment page. I say to students, hey, listen, I know you just want to know about the assessment, so let's just get that out of the way now. I think that's a really good idea because then they get the message that you know what they're about. You were a student once. And so I will talk about the assessment piece before I talk about anything else in the unit guide. And frankly, I think the design of assessment and the implementation of assessment is one of the most critical pieces of what we do because students are so driven by it. Even while you're trying to fight that culture away, they are driven by it. So I put a lot of effort when I'm designing stuff or redesigning it into assessment. I put heaps of time into it. I put heaps of time also into being absolutely explicit and absolutely no change. If I gave you, if you're making a list of the worst things to do as an academic, up right high on that list would be something about changing assessment on students. That will get you the worst feedback, trust me. So I try not to change things. Now, I've actually put this up as a good example. You know, here's what I say, I make it clear. I even put what time zone it's going to have to be in by. I've had a student try that on me. I'll mark, I'm currently in plus 8 hours or whatever it is, therefore I handed it in at 5 o'clock. So I try, do you know what? As an academic, you're a learning machine as well. You slowly learn what to put in, so I'm handing you my tips from 30 years of experience. So I put in the time of the week. I do quite a clever thing. My unit guides are designed for the least possible change that I have to make. So if you notice, the assessments are due on the Friday, 5 o'clock, on the week outlined on the timetable. Why have I written like that? Because then I don't have to put dates on my assessment sheet. I only changed. There's one thing I need to change, that. And all the rest just works for the next semester. So I minimise the variability. Now this one I've picked in particular because I was sick this semester. So what did I do? I had to show empathy to my students. So the only change in assessments that I think are actually okay are to stretch deadlines outward. Students don't mind that. Hey, listen, I'm really sorry. I've been a bit sick. We didn't have the session last week, so the assessment will be, the hand-in date will be 2 weeks further down. That's okay to do. It's illegal, let's be blunt here, it's illegal to change weighting. Don't bring them forward. Don't change the goalposts on students. That's my biggest tip. Even if you suddenly work out halfway through the semester that your assessment weighting is going to mean everyone's going to get 99, and you're just like, oh, how did I ever get to this problem? Just run out the semester and next semester fix it. Don't, and I know people have tried to do this, don't go, oh no, people are getting too high marks, I'm going to re-weight the exam. You know, you just end up with a complaint in the guild and you end up with the ombudsman and you end up in trouble. So just, if you make a mistake, 99% of them you should just wear the mistake and go forward. Try not to make the mistake though, and that's why I say try and not change too much on your unit guides in the sense of try and evolve it over time. Yeah?
But the issue is like too many students getting high marks. So do I need to change them? Why do I need to change the assessment?
Yes, good question. I'm with you. If my students are getting high marks and I have a set assessments that I think are reasonable for the content and they're getting high marks, well, celebrate it. Be happy. So, no. And in fact, most universities I've ever worked with, there is no students must get an average of 60, no student can get over 80. You know, I've had the odd dental school have some silliness in it, but really I've never seen. No, I don't believe in that either myself. Have you got any experience of those sorts of things? The average in a school must be 63 or whatever it might be?
The curve.
You've had some curve fitting in schools?
Yeah.
I'm not a big fan of curve fitting in the sense of, well, you know, I've taught medical and dental students, you know, the top 0.1% of the population. Are we going to apply a curve that includes the other 99.75% of the population and make the curve, and they would be just in the slither at the top? Or do we want to make a curve within them? It's usually we make a curve within them, isn't it? I don't think that's reasonable, is it? When you think about it in that context, there's such an elite set of minds. So I'm not big on curve fitting. I would say most places in Australia have abandoned curve fitting. I don't think it goes on. Certainly none of the universities in Perth do allow any curve fitting to go on. So I think that's going away. Is that common? People are looking at me.
With my experience in Curtin,
There's still some curve fitting in Curtin.
ECU as well.
ECU as well.
Because
Not-
I remember one day when the coach commander came to our class and says, look, but he got go away from the coach commander right now, but he said, look, as a student, if you get 50%, you're good. 60, you're doing well. So,
Wow.
asking why, for some students, 80, for example, he said, that's the average of a student, you're still very weak.
Yes.
I said, okay, that's average of student, but if I reach that scoring,
Yes.
I deserve 80 or 90.
Yes.
He said, no, look, that's what I have. If you get it, come and see me.
Well, You know, I'm going to be subtle here in the sense of if you set good assessment and it comes out that it is a average of 65, 70 or whatever it might be, that's okay, that's fine. But if you're saying you got 90 but then they use some maths to bring it back to be 70, I'm not keen on that. In that. Say again?
It's happening with me.
It was happening
Yeah. I think 86
and they moved it backwards.
to 79.
Okay,
Do not get everything.
okay. Well, to be honest, there you go. I'm out of step.
At that time I was in the first assessment, the first
Yes.
semester,
Yes.
and they said, I go to the lecturer and ask him why. He said, if you have anything, just don't complain. And culturally,
Yes. Understood. You don't have to. You don't. But here is open. You can speak your mind. I don't think that. I've not seen that applied here. In my experience, I certainly wouldn't be applying it, and frankly, in my view, I would be dissuading you from applying it. I would be saying to you, make good assessment. Don't make the assessment, you know, is the sky A, blue, B, red, C, black. You know, make good assessment that assesses to the level that you think your student should be at, and let them produce results, but not mathematically bend the numbers. I don't believe in number bending for assessment. So yes, the things I wanted to talk about on this slide were clearly be explicit, be clear. You'll notice we have 4 items of assessment. I call them modules, doesn't matter, 4 items of assessment. So we spread the assessment load out. This has no exam in it. This is an odd sort of unit. So we'll talk about exams in a bit. And then only have something that you change in one place. Don't keep... I've seen this so many times. People spend hours and hours rewriting their unit guide. No, try and eliminate it down to just a small rewrite. Distribute the load. I think that's a really good thing to do for both your students and yourself. Don't make one item worth 90 and another item worth 10. Distribute the load, and distribute the load relative to the content. So don't put 90% on one tute and 10% on the other 13 weeks. You know, get the balance right. So distribute the load, but recognise at the same time, every time you have an assessment, it costs you time or money to mark it, to review it. It costs you for the student to actually sit it, and there will be 3 or 4 students who don't sit, who are sick or whatever, and they will sit on another day. There's roll-on cost in this. So I know this is a bit something that usually academics don't think much about, but actually think about the cost of what you're doing. It makes you a better academic when you put the 2 factors together and think through both. So recognise the cost in assessment. Cost is high. Assessment is hard to do and time consuming. If I look back at my 25, 30 years, many a weekend has been spent marking exam papers. Hundreds of weekends in my 30 years. So, you know, it has a human cost in it too. So please think carefully about the weighting. That's a really important thing. I finally worked out from some friends' kids I know that this word rubric is rubric. Not only are you told that 20% of your mark is against this item, but in that item you need to have done this, this, this and this. and you get 3% for that and 2% for this, and you know, it's like that. Again, controversial. I think mine are probably a little controversial. That's very constraining, particularly in health sciences, for example. Let me give you a great example. Let's imagine we broke a little exam up for giving local anaesthetic down to 5% for taking good history, 7% for where to put the needle, 9% for making the syringe right, or whatever it might be. Let's imagine they forgot to write on taking a medical history. That can kill someone. But in the rubric, it's only worth 5%. So they could get 95% and still be lethal as a clinician. Would you want to go to them? No. So I'm not so driven by the specificity down to that level of a rubric. So what I provide is, I actually don't use the word rubric because it has such meaning, particularly in this, where, go and check, wherever you work, check what your high school system's doing, because students come with that mental picture and they want to follow through. Here, we're getting the word rubric all the time now. I call it objectives. And I say, hey, listen, the objectives you need to meet in this assessment piece will be these sorts of things. I write them out in different ways. But do you notice I don't put 3% next to each one or 2% next to this one or whatever. I go, look, this is the objectives you need to meet. Students seem to be happy to accept that as explicit advice on what they need to do in their assessment. I'm probably flying close to the wind because I think students are expecting me to put 1% against this, 3% against that, which I refuse to do. But if you can get confident, if you can get the confidence of your students to say, listen, I am fair, I will mark against these, but I'm not going to put 2%, 3%, whatever, because, and you give an example like I've just given, I think that's a better way to go. So give objectives for each assessment. In your article, your task is a journal-ready map as images, ... Write out explicitly what they need to do. Don't leave ambiguity. Does that fit with where you've worked? Do you have to do that where you've had experience? Yes?
I think I make a mistake, but because I agree with the students on the instructions to do the assessments, so I need to improve.
Yeah, that's okay. That's cool. It's fine. I suspect what you will find is your students will start to demand it. I've seen that over the years. A trend that starts in one place in the world, you see it slowly creep across the world. So I think your students will start to demand it, so you'll be all right. You're in front of them, which is good. How about you? Any experience on that? No? Have you had it given to you as a student, a rubric?
I didn't teach.
No. When you were a student at ECU,
Yeah.
did they give you a rubric?
Yes. Still.
High specificity, like with 1% for this? Yeah. Did you like it as a student?
I don't know how to explain that, but it's made from students' views.
Yes.
It's fair because you see what we have done with that mark.
Yes.
But as complete assessment, because sometimes it works for which have in kind.
Yes.
For example, percentage.
Yes. I think it's really important that if you've built the culture of you care about your students and you have a positive relationship with them, there will be an element of trust that you will do the right thing. And if you build that relationship during the course, then I think you can get away without putting 1% against each. They will trust you to be a reasonable assessor. Yeah.
So I remember when I was an undergrad student back in Saudi Arabia, we use objectives.
Yes.
Yeah, all the time, before the lecture, there's objectives. What you will learn from this, what you have to learn,
Yes.
and the assessment will be based on these
Yes.
objectives.
Yes.
And when I came here, I think rubric, when I started learning about rubric is a language institution here in Europe.
Yes.
So it's good for some sort of education. Look, for example, if you have assessment, writing something in English, essay or something, you know, for grammar you will get this percent,
Yes.
this mark. So you can discuss the person who assess you about this rubric and how they
Yes.
how they give you mark.
Yes.
But for any practical,
It gets a bit more blurry, doesn't it?
exactly,
Yeah. Yeah. For some simple assessments, it's easy, isn't it? You can be quite clear, you know, but it does. And I suppose maybe my teaching is at the more blurry end of the problem. But yeah, I prefer, and you are correct, you must make your assessment fit the learning objectives. Remember the first session we talked about building a course and building learning objectives? Clearly the assessments have to be in line with the learning objectives. That's taken for granted, you know, in a sense. You can't assess something that you weren't teaching or you weren't supposed to be teaching. So you're right, the learning objectives are behind all of this as well. Cool. Oh, this is one of my biggest tips as well. You guys have got that sentence so many times in the last few weeks. Big tip, when a student writes you an email and asks about assessment, the faster you respond, the less escalating it will be. Now, you know that. People are smiling because you were a student as well. You were closer to being a student than I was. You're angry. Why did I only get 42? And they write it on Friday afternoon and you go, oh, well, I'll answer that on Monday because it's one of the hundreds of students I have. No. If you answer on the Friday afternoon and say, hey, listen, you know, we can work this out. You come and see me first thing on Monday. We'll go through this together. You de-escalate problems. Because by Sunday afternoon, if you haven't responded, they'll be writing to the Vice-Chancellor or something. So please, big tip. If a student writes to you about assessment on any front, Mark, when's it due? Mark, is it worth 5% or 20%? In the unit guide it says 5%, on the web it says 20%. Whatever the question is, stop what you're doing and respond straight away. That will keep you out of trouble. That will keep you out of having angry students. Over the weekend, they will have gone on Facebook and got to all their classmates and go, oh, Mark never answered. You know, I don't know whether it's 20 or 50. And then by Monday, you'll have 50 people on your doorstep shouting with placards, you know. Just answer. I'll tell you one really good trick. If you don't know the answer, just go, gee, there's a problem there. We'll work that out. You know, give me a couple of days. I'll find a solution to that. ... At least get back to them. Really important message. Think of it from their side. That's all you have to do. Put your own feet in their shoes and think they're sitting at a desk about to explode at you. Calm. Oh, and I do want to say one more thing here. If you make a mistake, say sorry. There is nothing, you will get the teaching award. You add it up. You're human, I'm human. I'm going to show you some spreadsheets and how we do it. If you add up wrongly and forget a piece of assessment, I had one last semester. 36% was their final assessment. They go, Mark, I'm so sad I got 36%. You know, can I come and talk to you? I says, yes. First thing I'll do though is I'll double check. Somehow on the spreadsheet, one of the cells weren't added up, it went to 70. So, how nice is that? What an email to write back. Sorry, we made a mistake with the maths. Your mark is going to be recast at 70. Sorry. Use the word sorry. Don't be afraid of the word. You can make mistakes, you're human. So that's a really good thing to do. Be sorry. I'm sure you're going to face it far more than I do. I now have students say, Mark, could you reassess my work because I got 82, I think it should be 83.1 for an assessment worth 13% of their overall mark in the subject. I'm quite open. I always write back and say, hey, do you understand you are talking about 0.02% of your overall mark in this subject? I'm quite happy to look and check for you, but please, because I just want to set a tone. That's about tonal setting, isn't it? That's about, could we not worry about the small things, could we learn? That is a student who has moved into assessment is everything. I don't care about the learning, I want the 14th decimal point of my assessment to be right. One more thing I'll say that, I'll save that for later. Respond immediately. Yeah. I think this is true. I think the days of written exams are numbered. I think in your generation, in your journey, you will see the end. I think I'm an archaeological piece already in that sense. Written exams, I think, are on the way out. It's more about how the examination reflects what the workplace will want of you. Now, that might be a written piece of assessment. I'm not saying the pen is going to disappear or the typewriter or whatever. I'm saying that sitting there for 3 hours writing on 4 questions, I think that's going to disappear over the next few years. It's already on the way out. I'm sure you've all sensed it in the courses you're doing already, that as you've gone further through your course, the number of written exams has diminished and the number of sort of practical-based assessments in some form has increased. Is that the sense you get? Yeah?
Why do you think this is the way or the trend for that?
I think the trend will be much more of those practical work-based assignment/assessment things. And the tragedy, there'll be less of the written assignment as well, because the plagiarism / buying someone to write them for you stuff is becoming so rampant in the world that we will have to, you guys will have to work out ways to prevent that from going on. For example, or maybe you've been exposed to it. I do one about, please would you build a map of, in one of my units. Oh, you saw the note before. What I do is every student gets a random bus stop to draw the map around. So no 2 maps are ever the same, and I have about 10,000 more variations up my sleeve. So you will have to do that so you don't get recycling or, working to get it sorted. I've had days when I'm not sure what some students just don't think. I've had days where written assessment has come in from one student and then 5 seconds later the next and 5 seconds later the next. And I just think I'll just stand out of my office and go walk over to the library. I'll see them all sitting there together making it all up for me. It was obvious they all did it together and they just all hit the button together at the same time. You have to work. You're going to have to be smart about building assessments that avoid all these sorts of problems. I just learnt the other day, probably breaking all secrecy, I just learnt the other day, you guys probably tell me you all know, that people are now taking images of the text that they've written and putting it in the document and then PDFing that because some of the plagiarism software doesn't read images, it only reads text, and so it's not caught in the plagiarism systems. It just unfathoms me, but you know, that's when you've got this problem of the culture of I'm here to learn versus I'm here just to get a grade. So that's why I keep going back to that as a core problem we face. So yes, I suspect this is coming. It's going to take a while in some traditional places.
I just want to ask about the personal opinion about the double pass.
So shout loud.
The double pass.
The two bit past exam.
Past exams.
Yeah, and sometimes you need double pass. It's been like, if you got more than 50% of the unit, you need to get more than 50% also in the exam to pass.
Oh yes, I call that double jeopardy. That's a classic. Let's look back at this. That's a classic issue. That is from a dental school. That's a medical school thing. That.
Yeah. I faced that in school public health academy. Where I
Wow.
there.
Okay. Just so everyone's clear of what we're talking about. Simple people like me would go, after you add up all the marks, you need to get above 50. I don't care if you get 5 or 0 for one of them, but if the whole lot add up over 50, you pass. And we are now discussing what I call multiple hurdles. Multiple hurdles are little sub-clauses that says you must pass this module and get 75 in this module, and you know. In some places, yes, you need that. I think it's very thin though. I don't think there's too many spots that you need that sort of granularity of sub-rules. And frankly, my perspective would be try and minimise it. As an academic, minimise that. This is not a game of horse jumping over rails. You know, this is just the nature of life. Some people are good at some bits, some people are good at others. That's okay. Yes, I have seen that. I've seen that even in practical exercises. You know, all sorts of hurdles. To some extent, you know what, I sense that as an insecurity in building an assessment that measures the right things that you want to assess. You know, you're playing a game of mathematical whack-a-mole, aren't you? Add another rule to try and prevent student X from doing that. You know, well, you run out of distance on the rules, you know. So I would personally try and gravitate away from all those sorts of sub-rules. In the experience I have at high levels, at master's levels, usually I see a tendency for students to get a very low standard deviation across modules. Let's put it that way. Mathematically, you know, they're usually fairly consistent. They put in effort. You know, great students, 86 students are 86 across all of them. That's normal, usually. It's extraordinarily rare that a student, if you've set the right message in the room, that, hey, listen, I expect you to learn, that all of a sudden they're going to go, well, look, I'll just go to the beach for the 4th stats module and get 0 because I've already got, you know, 51 and a quarter from what I already have. Have any of you ever done that? No, I don't think so. I can't expect that. So, you know, I think most students, if you set the right message, that you will disappoint me as Mark Tennant, a person, if you go to the beach for the stats model because you've already got 51. That's the sort of thing you've got to do, you know, if you have that good relationship.
I think the most of the units, they have a double pass. They apply the double pass on the final exam, which usually like written exam.
Yes.
And I think this is unfair.
Yes.
For many reasons. First thing is, as you say, it's second thing is it's unfair for the second language.
Yes.
Especially in the written exam. So if we have 2-hour exam and there is like 5, 6
Yes.
questions,
Yes.
and I sit in that exam and there is like people who's native speaker here and they
Yes.
write English perfectly. And,
Yes. Who put-
I have this struggle.
Who put their hand up to ask for another book to keep answering?
Exactly. But me, even if I try to think in English,
Yes, yes, yes.
I can't be compared with a native speaker.
No.
Even if I'm
No.
PhD or master or whatever.
But
Yeah, this I think.
that
it's subjective for the assessor. So when he reads my writing, my handwriting, this might affect the mark. And
we'll come to that. Yes.
Yeah.
Look, I, for all sorts of reasons, I don't believe in that. There's another good reason. There's another really obvious reason. That's a 1 day, 3 hours on 1 day. Are you good or bad at that moment in time? Is that really a measure of a person over their time or career? That's not a measure. You want a sequence of assessments spread out that tests the person as a general principle, not just on the day, could I cram enough into my head the night before to blurt it all out on that morning to get out.
Also, the student doesn't know that sometimes have circumstances a week before that connect with the day there, exactly.
Yeah.
So that's affecting the students as well.
Yes, exactly. Look, I don't. No, you. From the start, I've said no. I don't believe in the sub rules. Let's call them the double. What did you call it? Double pass. I was going to call it double jeopardy, but the same thing, you know. No, and I as an academic, maybe it's because I'm an older academic, I have to have more courage in what I set up for my students to say, I want you to learn. I have to have that. You have to build that courage to say that I want you to learn. Come and learn. Not, oh, in the exam I might, suddenly think that's not so good. Not the way. Cool. Written exams.
Isn't that, sorry,
Yes.
the expectation of the university and the assistant himself? Because you need, as a university, you need to have a certain number of people who passes, a certain number of people who...
I get that.
As a university, I expect you to be as good as the other students.
Yeah, I get that question all the time.
Go out and fail outside the real world, then they'll say, where did you graduate from? Then the university is back.
Yes. Now, there's a couple of things there. First thing I want to say is universities, nowhere I've been, have ever told me you must pass 37% of your students or you must fail 2%, or I've never had that said to me. I've never even sensed that in the universities I've operated in across the world, that those sorts of rules apply. I think universities are bigger than that. And I think their accrediting bodies that accredit them won't allow that now. So let's put that piece aside first. You should never, can I be honest, even though I'm on the tape, if you work in a place that says you must fail 10% of your students, look for a new job. Because that's not real, is it? Yeah, it's just not real. So let's put that piece there. Then you're talking about the pressure of if your students don't progress well in the workplace, does that reflect on the institution? Of course it does. Reflects badly. But do you think that 1 3-hour exam solved that? I don't think so. I think what solves that is that you make a good course. You make a course that people are passionate to learn from and to grab information, and if they get stuck when they're in the workplace, another really important thing as an academic, always, every one of my students, you guys have heard already, every one of my students I go, you never get to leave our group And that's my code for, if you are somewhere else on earth and you are stuck, you can always email us or ring us up and we will help you out. If you do that for all your students, not only will you get prizes and win awards and things, but that keeps the reputation of your university solid too. I get it all probably once or twice a month. I get rung up by a dentist from Australia somewhere going, Mark, my injections don't work at the moment. Can you give me some updates? I go, yeah, no problem. And I'll send them a little video and I'll write them something or talk to them. That's the way to keep your reputation of a university solid. Have a good course. Keep that connection with that student after they've graduated, so if they get into trouble, they can ask a question and feel comfortable asking. It's not going to be that 3-hour exam. That would be my view. That's a strong answer. But it's not, that 3-hour exam is not going to solve anything. In fact, I will bet you, it's a good experiment, you know. If you've got a student who's a friend of the family or something that you know, let them do their exam and then 2 weeks later give them not the same exam but the same level of exam in that content again. I'll bet you 90% of it will have left their head. You guys were just like me, high capacity students. The one thing a student has is a good short-term memory to get stuff in to pass the exam. Not useful. That's not what you want for an employment position, is it? So, reputation of universities, you are spot on, rests on the good relationship with students and the learning that you give them that they can translate into work. Not on exams. Written exams. Even though I've just said they're disappearing, they're still here. And I suspect all of you will go back to working in environments where you have to set written exams. I just have a few tips and tricks that I want to talk about setting them. First is be absolutely explicit with the instruction set you give. Here's an example. Time allowed, 2 hours and 10 minutes reading. That's not the 10 minutes reading is inside the 2 hours. Do you get it? That's why I've written it like that. You get 10 minutes and then you get 2 hours. I know that sounds crazy. You might be looking at me going, well, that's obvious, Mark, duh, that's how exams work. But you know, there are times when people think it doesn't work like that. They come from environments where the 10 minutes was inside the 2 hours. So, get it out square. Instructions. There are 2 sections in the paper, notice, written in English and numbers. Answer 2. You know, I'm not going to read the whole lot out, but look how, you can't get more explicit than that, can you? 1 action, 1 line. How much is it worth? The written paper is worth 75%. Section A is 50, Section B is 25. And the viva voce later on is worth 25%. One tip from a person who's failed before, make sure they add up to 100. I've done that before. I've written it and gone, oh my goodness. You know, the students have gone, where's the other 20? How embarrassing. So just get a friend to check it, but just be absolutely explicit on the written examination. Another really good trick, is it here or not? It might be on the next slide. No, it's not. Oh yes, okay. I know historically, oops, oh, I was told by a senior academic, Mark, you know, put the marks next to each question. This question's worth 46.37 and this question's worth 27.22. But don't work out how many minutes they should spend on it. That's their problem to work out. Well, this is not a gymnastics competition or a maths Olympics. So I do not agree with that. Be explicit. So look at this next piece. This is the exam. Follow on at that piece. Answer any two of the following. This is section 8. Each is of equal values. Allocate 40 minutes per question. Now, that doesn't say you must only, I'll steal the page away when your 40 minutes is up. That just means here's the clue of what you should allocate to do that question. So, my comment about being explicit is really specific. Give the student everything. Don't leave them having to sit there and go, I've got, the paper's worth 234 marks. This is the classic, isn't it? It just unfathoms me. The paper's worth 234 marks, but there's 120 minutes. That will be 0.78 marks per minute. Get their phone out. Oh, I'm not allowed to use your phone. Don't do that to people. Make it easy.
So, what if they answered 3 questions from this one? Are they going to get 75 instead of 50?
Oh, really good question. And students do that all the time.
Yeah.
Choose 2 and they write all 4. Now, there's 2 pathways you can go with that. I'm old. In my younger days, I was advised you take the first 2 that they write, and that's the 2 you mark. As I've got more older and more calm in life, I mark all 4. I take the 2 best. Why do I do that? The student's going to have left the exam, gone to their mates and gone, oh yeah, geez, I marked, and they're suddenly going to work out that they wrote on all 4, which halved the amount of time they had. And they're suddenly going to be in a mental, they're the ones who are going to be emailing you that evening going, oh my God, what have I done? I've been crazy. Why not show some empathy and say, look, relax. I will mark them all and I'll pick the 2 best to be your mark. What's that going to cost you at the end of the day as an academic? It's not going to cost you anything. They might get, I'll tell you now, they might get 3 marks more than they would have. You do it yourself, work it out yourself. You'll get this happen. You'll find that the difference in their mark between picking the first 2 versus being able to say, I empathise with you, I will pick your best. That will give them some serenity. So that's what I do. Have it happen all the time. Even though, you can write 2, you can make a big print. I've tried using red font for the 2 out of 4. I'll show you what I actually have done in other places. But yeah, I picked the best 2. Any experience otherwise?
I think they usually take the first 2.
First 2. Yeah, that was me before as well. I've moved on.
I remember one assessment statistics something. There is like a correct identity statement, and you have to say correct or wrong.
Yes.
So the question says, don't answer after the sentence. There is like table somewhere, and
Yes, to fill in.
you have to fit the answer somewhere. So I do answer everything there,
Yeah.
and I didn't answer it in where
Yeah.
he instructed me to do. So I expect the full mark. So
Yes.
the day he gave us the result, he gave me 0.
Yeah, of course.
I have been I spent 3 weeks trying and begging him.
Yes.
Please help me. He said.
Yes.
And the instruction is clear. You have to go there. And after that.
Yeah, but can I... Now, do you know what?
Yeah.
Look at what that's done. You are retelling that story. How many years ago was that? Yeah, a long time. Still retelling the story. In your mind, you're thinking about that academic. You're thinking about that university. Was that worth it? No, of course not. It brings bad blood to your institution. That was not worth it.
Bad memories.
Bad memories. If that person had gone, that was a dumb thing to do. Why'd you do that? But this time, I'll sort it out for you. But just read the instructions better next time. What story would you be telling now, 7 years later? A completely different story. You would be thinking differently about the person, everything. You want to build a learning relationship with this person down the track as well, and you want your institution to be seen positively.
So one of the stories that when I was undergrad, I was surprised how easy of the exam it was. So when I finished and handed out the paper, I forgot to put my name on it. So
Yep, happens all the time.
yeah, and then it was like 90 people.
Yes.
So the lecturer, he was so kind. He went through the sheet of the attendance.
Yep.
And he found out.
He worked out it was you.
Yeah, and put my name on the sheet.
Yeah.
So and then he said, next day he said, Mazen, you did that. You got the full mark, but you did that. And I remember how he was excited and how you handed the paper, the first one.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
I figured out your name and I put it.
Yeah, and look at the grin on Mazen's face as he tells the story. And in his mind, he's got that academic, and I reckon if you ever went back to that institution, you'd go and have a smile and tell them the story. Relationship building. Beautifully done. And what did it cost him? You know, you have to think about that in the sense of what does it cost you as an academic to show human spirit. It doesn't cost you anything. It's a winner. Cool. Few things. Did I write practice? Yes. These are my tips. These are the things I would recommend. Give out a practice exam. And I always reuse one of the questions in the practice exam in the real exam. That makes the student, because the news passes on, please don't think that every student group is isolated from last year's. That's not true. Everyone learns from the years before. That means that they will actually do the practice exam and probably learn from just doing that at home on their own or with their friends or something. So I quite openly say, one of the practice exam questions will be in the real exam. That's fairly motivating to learn. Oh, yeah, please. You're not allowed to take the paper home, you know, it's high security. How long do you think that lasts? I know one class group who confessed to me, multiple choice. You memorise question 1, you memorise question... They organised themselves. And immediately they finished, they walked outside, they reconstructed the paper. If you think you can keep an exam paper secure by going, you must hand the paper in. I've even had one university, you must sign a stat deck that you won't tell anyone the questions.
Yeah.
Do you seriously think that's going to work? Yeah, we're all laughing at each other. We're all sitting in the room together as friends here laughing. Because of course not. So please, as modern contemporary academics, understand there is the internet. There are phone cameras. There is a mind with a fairly good memory in it. Stop being silly, so don't do that. Work out your assessment so you can change, juggle, be sensible. Make new questions every time. Even if it's the same content, shuffle it around. Describe, list, discuss. It depends on your discipline. But change the questions all the time. That's your job. Yeah.
Excuse me, are you going to mark the practice exam?
No. I just give it out as a practice exam. What I'm actually doing with the practice exam is giving out the instructions. So they're actually reading the instructions before they get there. And I'm quite explicit. The exam will look identical to this. The instructions will be the same. The question, and I have a laugh. I do that. This is identical to the final exam, except the questions will be different. There's always a little bit of laughter when I say it, but it's going, learn the instructions. So when you turn up at the exam, you're not reading those instructions for the first time with panic in your eyes. So that's what I'm trying to do. Yeah. Test it on another academic. Every exam I've ever written all my life, I always test it on a friend. Just to get rid of the crazy, that the marks actually add up to 100 or whatever number you're going to have. That, even down to the basics that you make mistakes every so often. Once you've done it for 30 years, you will make all those mistakes in your life. It's normal, not foolproof. That tip number 5 is a really good one. I watch all these academics, particularly newer academics, wait till the end of the semester before they start writing their exam. But there are occurrences when you would teach and go, hey, this is a really important piece, and you'd show a couple of slides and talk about it. The students take that in. They'll get a little pink fluoro texter and colour in, Mark said this is important. If you're not building the exam on the way through or making notes of when you said that's important, you will ask a question on the minors. You might even say, don't worry about this slide, this is just for interest. And then 8 weeks later when you write the exam, you write an exam question on it. And it's on the videotape that you said it. You'll be, you're cooked if that happens. So I absolutely recommend you either write the exam before the semester or at least on the journey through. What I do is after each lecture or after each practical session, I go home and I just write a little note. I just have, on my computer obviously, I just write a little note going, no questions from this, I did emphasise this but. So then, I can slowly build my exam paper, well, I build the notes around my exam paper as I go along. Don't mislead your students. Because what happens is, that group will tell the next group, Mark says bits are important, but really he asks about the slides where he says it's not meaningful.
That's exactly.
And you're like, that just, all your effort to set the cultural base of your education model is wrecked by that. What was it? Smiling Assassin. Mark says the course is really easy, then everyone gets 25%. Don't do that. So yeah, please, write as you go along. Yeah, there you go, give clear hints. Give clear hints. Clearly when you're giving 13 lectures over a semester or whatever it is, there are bits that are going to be more important than other bits. Just be open and transparent and go, hey, listen, what we're talking about today will make a difference to you for the rest of your working life. This is important stuff. But then follow through when you're assessing. The important stuff comes to the front. So they're my sort of tips on exams. Practical tests. These are other things these are my experiences of practical tests. I've got to move on from written exams. I know this sounds crazy, but I really recommend having a dummy run of the practical test in some form. Even if it's only, have you ever done, I don't know about the disciplines, but we call it musical chairs. There's an item here and then there's an item here. You sit here for 2 minutes and there's some questions on, this item. And then after 2 minutes you move on to the next chair and you're asked about that thing. What we've done is about a third of the way through the semester, we say, hey, listen, for the last hour of this class, we're going to do a practice prac test. No marks count, we're just going to do it, and then you can mark your own as you leave. So no extra workload on the academic, but just to give them the motion of what the assessment will be like. Like a mock test, just a practice run. That goes down very well, because then on prac test day, it's not like all foreign. Do I move to the left? Do I move to the right? You know, how long do I have? All of that's out.
That's different when you give the students a mock.
Different because the practice room arrangement, you have to carry your own pencil around. They have logistics, and so that's what this is about. A mock written exam. You notice what I said before. Give a practice exam. I use the word practice as a lower level than a mock, because I think it's more, you can look at it yourself, you can mark it yourself, you can get your friends to mark it, all of those sorts of things. That's fine. I don't do it as a formal mock. It's probably the same.
What I mean, during the semester, as a lecturer, it's necessary to give them in the beginning of the semester or in the end of the semester or running with the semester. What's the best way to give the students?
Good question. When? When's the right point in time?
So you mean every individual class? Or?
No. You run out of steam, don't you? There's not enough. So what would I normally do? I would give one written mock once. I'd usually leave it till about 2/3 of the way through the semester, I reckon, somewhere in there. Not the end, but back from the end. Just out of interest, in this university, mid-semester break. Except second semester this year, it's been a bit late, but normally I would mid-semester break. For the practical one, I'd probably go about halfway through. I do that also because halfway, in practical terms, you've got enough material to do a few stations, so you can actually give them what I call a level hint. You know, how difficult is the question at a station going to be? So I can actually use some of the material they've learned already, so they get a measure of the complexity of the questions as well. Because I don't want them to turn up thinking the question will be, name this thing, when I'm going to ask them, please explain the chemical composition of plastic. You know, I want them to grasp.
So it's like being familiar with the content.
Yes, it gives them a chance to familiarise with the content of the first half of the semester as well. So yeah, that would be about, call it a half to 2/3 would be my tip. Yeah. Oh, think about this. Make it logistically easy. I've seen some academics have a practical test that was 110 seats. So you went around this room, and after you'd been through every chair on this room, you went to the chairs in the next room. It's like, and poor students were going, oh, do I sit this table? Do I go that table? What? Mate, when we set up a practical exam in that musical chairs model or whatever it is, or any practical exam, my tip is to make it so self-evident what to do that if you weren't there, the students could work out what to do themselves. So make it logistically easy. Think through the security. And in fact, I've got some scenarios we're going to work through together, 3 scenarios we can all do. What do I mean? Well, let's imagine you have 50 students in your class and you're told you need to run the practical exam in this room that seats 25. What's your choices? Your choices is to build 2 completely separate practical exams, one for half the class and one for half the class. But then you run the risk of a student going, that what they got was easier than what we got. So then you have to think, well, how can I do this? Okay, well, I can get one group in, do the exam, then I can get the next group to come to the room next door and wait. This lot go out this door, that lot come in here, no one met each other, no one phoned each other. You need to think through the security of the logistics of how you're going to do it. It's not that simple, okay? And you need to be open with the students that you've done that. Why do we have to come 15 minutes early and sit in a room? Well, I'm telling you, you're doing that because you're not going to pass it on from some... Why do we have to all put our phones in the basket in the corner of the room? Well, it's pretty obvious. I'm quite, students like to know that you've thought it through. And they're not going to... They're not crazy either. I think sometimes academics think students are crazy. They're quite normal people. They when you go, well, you're going to put your phone in the basket because they don't want you getting text messages from the people in the room next door with the exam. Oh, yeah, that makes sense. Right. So work through... In fact, what I used to do when I was still early in my game, I used to actually go and walk it through myself and think where all the holes were. What if a student, while they were waiting, needed to go to the bathroom, but at the same time another one from this room would go to the bathroom? I'd have 2 separate bathrooms sorted out. Just not I'd have the police in the place, but just enough thought through that I knew that I could manage. Another one to think about, what if there was a fire alarm halfway through the prac exam? What would you do? I bet you've never thought about that as a student. I bet that most of your academics probably haven't thought it through either. Well, you just have to have a think. What would you do? Do you ask them to take the paper with them as they leave? Do you ask them to leave everything on the desk? What do you do? Well, I'll tell you the answer I have after this long. Put everything down on the desk and walk out. Memorise the seat you were sitting at. Because that way, they go outside, they'll yabber to each other, that's cool. But I have 2 plans. If it's a high stakes practical examination, I will go in after the alarm is finished, I will go in, pick up all the papers as they are, lay down a brand new set, put the names of each person on the brand new set, and you say, continue writing answers for the next stations from here. Because then they can't change the answers backwards. Yeah, everyone's laughing, but got to think it through. Got to think it through, What are you going to do? So, the last one is a current one, isn't it? What are you going to do if the university says you can't have an exam today, or this month, or this year? So, you have, please, with assessment, run all that through your mind. In fact, this semester I've changed, a good example, this semester we used to have global challenges. We used to have everyone present a little lecturette on a topic. I've just turned it, everyone make a podcast. Even though we're not in lockdown or anything, I just at the beginning of the semester said, I'm not going to have some, on a Sunday night, our Premier go, you're not going to work for the next 3 weeks. Having to write to all my students going, sorry, we can't have the lecturette, which is worth 15% of your assessment, please do this instead. No, my plan B has become plan A from the beginning. We all make a podcast, you email me the podcast, that's your lecturette. So, I suppose, little practical examples of thinking through all the scenarios of all the things that can go awry in exam situations. And I always share one lovely story from a friend of mine, bless her. She had a class with 1,200 students in it. And she held it up in the big hall. It was on a Saturday. Big problem. And when 9 o'clock came, the invigilator person said, right, you can turn the exam over and start. They turned it over, and every student had been given the answers, not the questions. Yeah. And so, thank goodness she's a good, smart academic. As soon as she saw it, she said, stop, everyone turn their papers over, collected them all up. She got a question paper, and she got 3 of the invigilators and raced over to the local venue she could and got 3 photocopiers going simultaneously and then handed out question papers. But at least she'd thought it through. She knew where she was going to go. She had access cards. She had a plan in her mind how to address a crisis. So please, think it through. For high stakes exams, and I'm going to talk about college level, I'm going to show you, we'll stop for a bit and I'll show you an example of what I do to give a lecture on an exam. I go through everything about it, so we'll do that in a bit. Marking. This is the bit often scares new academics to, how do I get on a mark? This is my 10-point plan. Note that numbers 4 and 9 are the same because I'm emphasising numbers 4 and 9. Let's imagine, and I'm using my scenario of the fellowship examinations, I get 150 papers, a pile of paper about this high, sitting on my hotel floor, and I'm about to start marking. What do? I don't pick up any papers. I sit down with the question paper and just scruffily write out some notes about what I think are the key things I'd expect in the answers for each of these. Now, people would call it a marking key. I think that's the posh terminology for it. When I use the word marking key, I sense much more formality than I do it by. I sense that, you'll see this point, you'll give them 3 marks for that. It's almost the rubric in backwards form. I don't do that. I write just some notes on a sheet of paper of what I expect to see. Next thing I do is I pick 10 papers out of the pile. Unknown, because actually that's a good question I can ask too. All papers I mark are de-identified. So I don't know who they are. So I just pick out 10, I read them. Question 1, I'll read all question 1s, 10 question 1s. And then I'll look at my notes and go, geez, I wouldn't have passed, I made a mistake, I missed that. Or, or maybe I've been a bit hard here, or maybe 5 of the 6 students have interpreted the question completely differently to the way I have. So I'll need a secondary marking key for that question that is the different interpretation. So I'll take a sample of papers, read them. Because there will be many times in your life that your student cohort will interpret the question you write completely differently to the way you expected them to. And when you look at it, you go, oh yeah. I'm just memorising the feeling myself now, bringing it back, that sensation of, oh yeah, I can see why they've got that perspective on that question. How poorly written was that? That will happen. So you need to be able to adapt. So that's what I do next. Review my notes, and then I'll put some weighting against it. Now, I actually don't put numbers. I just put plus, 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 exclamation mark. So I just use a little sort of mnemonic scale against the points. And I can't say it enough. you are far better off being generous in this process. Look for 100, not for, 2 out of 200. Look to be generous. Yeah, I've put it in square brackets because this is me personally. I don't use the little guide I've made and then look at the essay and go, oh, yep, tick, I can give them a point for that, tick, I can give them a point for that, tick, I can give them a point for that. I look at the holistic answer relative to the key and give a mark against that balanced for the material. Because I find when you start going 1 or 0, 3 or 2, it mixes the... It doesn't give you the full context of the weight of what they emphasised versus not emphasised when they've written the answer. It becomes a little game of picking up keyword points, and that's often not useful. As you mark, enter the results as you mark on a spreadsheet and watch your mean, your standard deviation, how many are failing, how many are passing. Watch the analysis as you go through. Now remember I said these are all de-identified, I'll show you how I do that in a minute, but you watch the analysis as you're marking. Now I'm talking if you have 150 papers, if you have 15, the analysis is not so strong, is it? But if you've got a pile, your analysis will be strong on the way through. Sense where you are going. Why is question 3 so poorly done? It might not change the way you're assessing, that's fine, but it means next year I'm going to teach the content of question 3 differently. So keep assessing on the way through where you're going. Don't get grumpy or tired. Stop. And you know what? 150 papers. I'm going to be here till 3 in the morning, 6 nights in a row. Can you imagine if you're the student on the 5th night at 2:30 in the morning and you had little fine writing? The probability of you getting a bad mark relative to the one I marked in the morning is very high. I will be tired and grumpy. Don't mark like that. You need to mark with a consistent calmness of your heart and calmness of your body and mind. So the way I do it is by batch processing. In fact, my 150, I have 15 piles of 10. Because I know after 10, I'm starting to quote unquote go off. I'm starting to read too quickly, get angry when I see something that's silly, I go off. So I have 10, I mark 10, and then I go for a walk around the oval. I mark the next 10, I'll go and have morning tea or lunch or something. Then I'll mark the next 10, and it also gives me a sense of achievement. When you have a pile of 150, you do 10, you don't feel like you've achieved anything. But if you've got a little bundle of 10, you go, oh, that bundle, pick it up, mark it, put the bundle over here. Oh, I've got hope to get through this pile, So I highly recommend that as a process. Be extremely careful that, you haven't woken up in the morning and your kids woke you up at 4 in the morning because, they had a bad dream and you're cranky at your kids and then it's, 6 in the morning, you go, right, I'll just mark a few now. Why did they write that? I never said that. There's a high risk of doing that. So you need calmness. In fact, for my college marking, it's actually been a really interesting journey. We used to go to Sydney, and I used to sit in a university college room for 8 days and mark the papers. And because of the pandemic, I did it at home this year. I was worse. I know I was worse as a marker at home as opposed to living sort of on my own in a college room, in a pattern with batch processing, because I was under the influence of the phone ringing, the lawnmower man coming and mowing the lawn, all the stuff that goes on at home sort of thing. So you make sure you think all that through when you're marking. Don't be crazy. Be willing to go back and do batches again. I'll tell you what I do. Every batch I do in the night time, I redo. Not to the same depth, but I go through them and go, was I reasonable? Because I know personally that in dark, I'm not good in the dark. I'm dark. So I know that I probably influenced those papers just because of the time of the day. So be willing to go back. Don't just, done, I'm out, sort of thing. Be willing to reflect upon yourself. Marking papers is hard. It's a demanding task that you need to keep yourself fit and healthy to do. Outsourcing of marking. It's become a bit of a trend. Let's get 6 tutors together and all of us sit here and mark 20 each. And we can have it done in an afternoon. No. I've never seen that work effectively because everyone comes with a slightly different perspective on the mindset of what they expect in an answer. We are not all the same. I've always found myself going back over the team's marking and going, I wouldn't have given 3 for that answer, I would have given 4, or whatever it might be. So can I tell you now, at this end I would rather spend an extra week of my life and mark the whole lot myself to make sure that I do it with the evenness of one mind. I don't think I can write a marking key so perfect that I can change your mind about a perception of a different answer. So I actually believe in marking on your own now, in that sense. That doesn't mean I don't get someone to look at what I've done. I'll come to that in a minute. But for the first pass, I do it on my own. Outsourcing, I don't trust that as a mechanism for getting a fair result across a group of students. Yeah, the variation. I find the variation. I've only done it twice. I've been involved in it twice or 3 times, and the variation's been too high. I've just gone, no, I'm not doing that again. Any experience with it? Sense of it? Been involved as a tutor? As a marking team? No one. Okay, cool. It seems a trend at the moment because, despite it costing 6 staff 3 hours, we can get it done by 6 o'clock this evening. And it's like, yeah, but it's the same cost if you leave me for a week and I'll quietly do it myself. So I don't understand it myself. Vivas, oral exams. We've done this now for the college. We've actually made a video of a Viva. The students love it because it's sort of got a bit of entertainment and because it's 2 of the senior academics. So I Viva my senior colleague. In the room that we use, all of it being, but they can see it's a bit of a joke because it's, so it's got a bit of entertainment value in it. But it also explains the logistics of a Viva. Which chair do I sit in when I come in the room? Have you ever been to a Viva where you've walked in and gone, where do you want me to sit? No? Okay. All of that stuff goes away. Who are the people in the room? we have observers to monitor our performance when we do Vivas. So I've often had students go, is that person going to ask me questions? Are they assessing me sitting in the back corner over there? What are they? Sort of thing. Eliminate all that stuff. Make a little video. Hey, this is what the Vivas will be like. This is the room they're in. This is how they work. I think it's a tremendous way to do it. It takes 5 minutes to do. And it can actually have a bit of fun in it. You can have a laugh. In fact, one of them we made, obviously we do some anatomy Vivas, and we made it in a hotel, my buddy and I, and we had no skull because usually we have a skull. But there was a bread basket. So one of my videos about how to do a Viva, we use a bread basket to pretend to be a skull, and all the students absolutely love it. They kill themselves laughing. We'll always get these comments about, the bread basket, the bread basket. It's good. Viva. We'll sort of get started. I've sort of changed the path a wee bit. What I think we might do is I might send out the scenarios afterwards and we can work through them, and you can ask me questions and we'll do them by email and things. I think that'd be nice then. Everyone can have a think. They don't have to sit here and think. So I've just got about 3 or 4 different things I want to show you and use them as stimulations to talk about stuff. Like I said, for high stakes examinations, this, for example, is an examination process to basically become a specialist or not, a dental specialist. So this is a high stakes exam. So I thought I'd explain, when they are very high stakes examinations, the added steps that I take and I recommend you take. This is giving a whole half, 3/4 an hour lecture on what the exam will be like and what the do's and don'ts and that sort of thing is. Now, we're not going to go through the whole thing because you don't want the content, you want to know why we do it. So I'm going to walk you through what we do. These people, remember, are people who are well past having done exams for a while. So they are highly experienced exam takers, and I always think about students in the sense of like sports people. They've done hundreds of exams, and at this level they've passed every single one with credit and everything. So they're not amateurs, they're professional exam takers. But often they just need a little reminding about what to do and things. So we just give them a little pieces of reminders about what to do. Check the paper. Classic issues that happen. Be prepared. The admin team put out the histology examination, not the anatomy examination. I've had that happen. You turn up the exam and it's the wrong one. Like, can you imagine how that throws a student when that happens? So, those sorts of, we talk about that and make sure you read the paper and things like that. Be organised, have a plan, all those basic things. I've done this with you already. Actually read it, work out what's going on, work out the instructions. Literally, can you see how basic this feels? And just remember the sorts of audience we're talking about. These are, the elite athletes of examiners. And we still just go through this to make sure they're all clear about it. This is all stuff we just talked about. Make sure you write it appropriately, not just read it appropriately. Yes, remember the things, you might have done it when you were a student once, you forgot to turn over, there were questions on the back, all those sorts of things. So for you as academics, that means at the bottom, write end of examination. So if someone forgets to print the last page, the student will know because it doesn't say end of examination. So, we train our students to know to look for that. Yep. Page 2 of 2, the end. Know where the end is, sort of thing. We always sit there and laugh because it's never going to happen to us. You know, it does. It does. We talk a little bit about how to answer a question. You know, nothing new. I'm not going to go through all this. This is boring. We also talk about how to do the strategy. You know, this is a lecture on how to do an exam at the elite level, in a sense. So we talk about the strategy, which questions do first and what. A whole bunch of stuff like this. Priorities. Don't procrastinate. I'm just whipping through. You can see the level of stuff we cover. We tell students, don't do that. Why waste your time at rewriting the question? Have you ever done that on your exams? You know, I think students do it when they're nervous. Instead of just going 1 and start answering, they go 1 and write the question out again, like dictation, and then write the answer. You know, so we talk about that. We show some fun things. So we try and make sure it's actually, I think it's a really important thing, you know, again back to that culture of the relationship of education, to actually have a bit of a smile and a laugh, as well as a really valuable thing to add to teaching. And this is, you know, you read that answer, please. You're not in the discipline, it doesn't matter, but please don't write like that, you know. So we just have a laugh with our students. Don't write answers like this. Oh, yeah. You know, we talk about handwriting. You know, have you ever seen people who have writing that's... it just looks like one continuous flow with no paragraph breaks and things like that. Can you imagine it at midnight when you're marking that batch from the night batch? That will just makes you go cranky. We talk about, please, if you've got writing... And we had one candidate, this is a few years back now, that the biggest letter that they wrote in their entire paper was 2 millimetres high. So, you know, it's like, bring an electron microscope along to read it, sort of thing. Yeah. So yes, oh yeah, this is a classic. We all, you know, this is about training our students to do good exams. When I talk, I have a word of the year when I lecture for some reason. I don't know what happens in my head, but a word seems to stick in me each year. And one year it was beauty. Beauty. It's an Australian word for good. And I started getting the word back in the written exams. You know, we train our students, don't use the language that we speak, use the written language. Oh, I just lost it. That's all right. We'll stop there. So I suppose what I wanted to show you was that if they're high stakes exams, go the extra length to actually give people some real training on how to write an answer to that exam and how to present that. I think that's really valuable. It's not just the students see it as valuable to them, the candidates see it valuable to them, but actually for you, as the person who has to mark all of these, it actually makes your life easier too, if you've eliminated all the bad habits that some students get. So I would recommend that. This day and age, lots of these bad habits have disappeared because we now type exams. So all the issues of handwriting, using pencil, you know, all those sorts of things. You know, I spilt my coffee on the answer page or my water on the answer page and it's all washed away, you know. I've had them all. Those are all sort of eliminated now with typing exams. So that's the first thing I wanted to talk about. I actually think, and I've been tempted to actually make that into a little video lecture in a sense and let everyone have it, because I think people should know how to do a written exam effectively and efficiently to make our lives as academics better as well. Cool. Has anyone had that done, had that sort of lecture given to them? Never. Can you imagine what it does? It actually makes a difference, doesn't it? You probably sat there yourself, thought, oh, I wish someone had told me not to do that when I was sitting an exam. You know, it is valuable. Cool. There's a few other things I wanted to show and talk about. Yep. Remember I said to you, it's really important to enter as you go along. Analyse the data as you head along. I wanted to show you this. This is how, it's de-identified because I don't have, only at the end do I get the key and unlock who's who. This is how I do it. I use a spreadsheet that has a system of, this is one that's complete, a system that colour highlights cells depending on the grade a student got and things. So I can monitor how many people have answered which selection here. Here's the major answers. You can see this follows through. Have they answered 4 of 4 instead of 2? All those sorts of questions. So this just keeps, this is my tracking sheet. All academic, you should always operate like this because what it does is it helps you ensure you don't do dumb things like double enter a score, you don't miss entering a score. It keeps you stable as a data person. So please follow through, do exactly the same sorts of processes. The analytics is not here. I'll show you where the analytics is in a minute. This is just the raw entry. Also down the side I keep, this automatically ranks the result so I can actually see where I'm going in terms of rank terms as well for candidates. So please keep your data like that. And then I'll show you the next piece that is related. It'll get there. Good. This is actually, what do I say? I'm not just the examiner in one discipline, I'm the chief examiner for this entire program of 6 units, 6 programs. So I run the data analytics not just on my little piece, but I have to run it across the board for all the system. So this is exactly how we do it. We watch here, actually I'll just point with my hand, I think. We actually watch over years. So we use the previous 5 years as our benchmark for how is this year going. So as people are, each day of, I said it takes 6 days to mark these papers, as each day's spreadsheets come in, we upload them to this and then monitor, the red bar is the current year, we monitor how we're going relative to previous years. So when you're doing large-scale assessment, really important to watch where you're going all the time. Don't leave it to the end and then go, oh my goodness, we've got ourselves in a tangle here. A few little things to notice here, or just because you might think, my goodness, look at the size of those standard deviations. This is 50 to 80, the scale. So, this is the reverse of science in a sense. This is to magnify up to show any variation, and we actually use half standard deviations as our test. So we want to keep, really tight in the data. And then down the bottom here, you can see we continuously monitor. Down the bottom here, we continuously monitor credits failed and concedes are close to passes, when we have a Board of Studies meeting, we'll discuss that. So yeah, this is a real-time analysis as you go along. So a really important thing that I don't think many academics get to hear about or see or talk about. Very worthwhile in doing. Then we have a sequence of other things here. Here we monitor the daily as the vivas are happening, because if you've got 150 people, they're not all going to do their viva on one day. So you continuously monitor the data across this as well. And then I'll just show you this one. This is it all driven out of that original spreadsheet that you enter the data on. What we do also is we monitor for variation. If you got 98 for your written paper and then got 12 for your viva, something's awry. Maybe it should have been 9.8, not 98, or whatever it might be. So this just looks at the variation between the viva and the written, and just monitor if each individual's still close. Or if not, it shows you the differentials. And up here you can see, for example, up here, red is more than 75 marks apart. Yellow is, we just set some traffic lights in a sense to concern or not concern. So this is all stuff that academics should do while you're marking your papers. Don't just sit there and mark away. Actually do analysis on them as you go along. Now this is at scale because this is 6 disciplines, 150 candidates, this is scale, but it still applies. Even if you've got a class of 50, I still do this. So, yeah, that's that. And I've got one more piece in that journey to show you. Here again, same sort of thing. Here we run, clearly, if you've got two disciplines that are similar, let's imagine you teach, I don't know, making doors, and you teach making windows. A student sitting those two exams shouldn't be too far apart. They shouldn't get 99 for making doors and 12 for making windows. So always be looking to find a buddy discipline that you can check correlations. So we are lucky in this program we have 6 disciplines and they're actually in 3 pairs. So thank you. We can actually run correlations. You notice here that top one, we just monitor for the large standard deviations. Then we go, okay, what's going on here? Yeah, look at this one here, great one. A large standard deviation, 60, 70, 60, 60, 59, 37. So what it does is it go back to that discipline and go, hey, are you sure? Maybe you were very grumpy that night and you just marked horribly. Go and get that one out and double check. Be sure about what you're doing. There's plenty, you can see plenty of them here. Some extremes here. Look at this one here. Look how consistent they are. 59, 71, 55, 59, 59, 41. So consistency checking with your results as you go along is really important to be doing. How many times do I have to say it? Don't just sit there and mark and go, yeah, that's okay, and send it in. Be preventive. Because let's imagine in this, doors and windows, that student's going to come back to you and say, well, you know, all my other classes I've got 98 and you've given me 12. Are you sure? So you might as well get up front and understand your results before you hand them in. Because what will happen, and that's the other thing I wanted to talk about, what will happen is when you hand your results in, that's not the end. Do you know how the process works? Have you ever been to like boards of studies and things?
Write the reports.
Shout again?
The reports.
You had to write reports, okay. In fact, in most institutions, what happens is I'm not responsible for the marks a student gets. There's actually a board of studies or some equivalent name, and they are the people who are responsible for the mark the student gets. So when I hand in my marks, they still have to be ratified by a board. Now, the board is made up of the academics and they listen to the person who did the assessment. But when you turn up to one of those boards of studies, if you've got, you know, one student who has a 12 and they've got 98 and everything else, you're going to have to explain why did they get the 12. So you need to actually have gone through and understood why they got the 12. So you might as well do your homework early and get ready and understand what's going on. The other thing that happens at those boards of studies is if you had 50 in your class and 45 of them had failed, who does that reflect on? The students or you? On you. So at those boards of studies, there's a process of also, you know, reflection. How did you make an assessment that was clearly out of step with the learning level of the students? So you need to be prepared for those boards of study meetings. You need to prepare well. Don't turn up with your cup of tea and think that you can just wing it by chatting your way past the assessment issue. And be prepared. And that brings me to one other thing. This is sort of semi-random order now. Rounding. Results rounding. You know, you might calculate, and I've seen this so often, I just love it. I walk around unis and I see results up on boards to 2 decimal places. You know, Mark got 76.42. Well, all of us know you can't assess someone. Forget 2 decimal points, forget 0 decimal points. I suspect you probably, and I'll tell you what my number is in a minute, I suspect you probably can't assess someone to plus or minus 3 or 5%. If you did the same thing twice, you'd be out by a substantial amount. Me, personally, I reckon I'm about 3% after 30 years. So what's the point in giving a score of 79.6? Because your sensitivity, it's probably somewhere between 77 and 81, isn't it? And particularly at those boundaries, that has meaning. Let's think for a minute. You know, 80 is higher distinction, or I've forgotten what it is now, distinction versus credit. So at those boundary points, I always look through the results of my students before I finish the assessment and go, you know, am I stupid? Leaving a student on 79.6 when you know personally your sensitivity or specificity, it's not right, your accuracy is plus or minus a couple of percent, 3%. As beginners, you would be more like 5, I reckon. you can't sustain that. So I am always generous. I told you, generous. Move uphill, not downhill.
This is done in my college. They always use it to curve down.
Curve down! No, I don't think there's any point in curving down. No point at all. You want those students to be generous. What happens if that student becomes Elon Musk? You want him to think his university is a nice place and he'll build a new building for you or something, you know? You don't want him to be going around going, you gave me 79. So I think the answer in that space is to be generous. I'll tell you what I do, and it's going to be on tape now, so I'll probably get sacked for it, but I actually look very closely at everything from, let's call it 8.5, so 48.5, 68.5, 88.5. From the 8.5 upward, I don't want a student knocking on my door going, could you reassess all my work from this semester to look for 0.3%? What am I going to do then? Or, Mark, I want all my assessment items given to another academic to find 0.6%. Of course they're going to find 0.6%. There's no way I can mark to 2% accuracy. So my view, personal view, don't get into that. You don't want a student knocking on your door for 0.3% because it'll give them an HD, not a D. That just looks silly. So that's a tip, and I think many academics use the tip without speaking of it. I'll just let you have it as my generosity to the next generation. Good tip. Don't leave anyone in those little windows. It's not worth it. And then comes the dilemma of 48. You know, fail or pass. That's a really tough dilemma, isn't it? And
2 marks or 1 mark.
yeah, that's right. 2 marks or 1 mark or what, you know. Very difficult. Now, I am always I am always heartened by the consistency of students. Often I turn up at a Board of Studies meeting with a student with 48, having not slept well the night before, what should I do, where am I at? And then I hear the other people, or on the board up goes the results of all their other courses, and it's all 46, 44, 45, and then it becomes not my problem anymore. You know, it's just like, there is consistency. Students are consistent. Great students are great students, and students who don't pass, don't pass. So I suppose that's the first thing, is I don't panic. I lose sleep over it, even now. At this end of my career, I still lose sleep over students at the 48, 47 range, whatever it is. But usually it rolls out in the wider program that they're in, that you are not lonely at 48. Have I ever lifted a 48 up to a 50? Yes. When I've seen students, you know, in all their other programs, I've got 70, 70, 70, 68, 59, then my 48, and I've, you know, like I said, if I can only mark at 3%, yes, I've conceded marks at 48. That happens, but have I not conceded marks at 48? Sure, the reverse is true as well. So I take a judgment approach. That's the job of an academic. Now, what I would recommend is, if you get into that sort of position, ask a grey-haired friend. Ask for some wisdom. Don't try and make the call on your own. And the grey-haired friend will do exactly probably what I've just done, just go through the papers, check that it sort of adds up correctly. That'll be the first thing they'll do. Then they'll talk to you about the other students in the class, and they'll do exactly what I've just said to you, but don't do it on your own. So that's marking, getting the results together, inputting them, analysing as you go, and the Board of Studies process.
Usually, when I face this case, 48, not in our university, it's 60.
Yes?
So if I face 58 or 59, our manager or the head of the department force us to improvise these students.
Yes. Now, you're sitting there almost angry about it.
Yeah, I see the progress of the students, the attendance, the engagement in the class before giving these marks.
Yes, but
Because some students not deserve it.
yes, but your boss is being pragmatic. And I've been to court over students. Seriously, that was the words. And in the end, we had a smile and we almost laughed together. Not often I laugh with a judge or a legal officer, but we almost laughed at my own human fallibility. So to be honest, your boss is being pragmatic. Sometimes, you know what? Sometimes that happens, that in your heart you think the student has not performed well. In your heart, you think the student has almost made fun of the program. I've had that sense in my life at times too. They don't deserve the kindness. It's just going to happen. The only thing I learned from that is don't take it out on the next students. And there's a huge human tendency to do that. That's not negative on anyone here, but there is a tendency, last year we had 2 students, and I've used this language because I've heard it, sneak through. This year we're going to be much harder on them. We're going to make sure no one sneaks through. No, don't go there. I've seen that particularly in dental schools. I call it the pendulum. We go from, this year the average was 77. No dental student can get 77, that's outrageous. So the following year you've got 30% of the class failing. It's like, can we just stop the bus here, folks? I think the most important thing I can tell you about assessment is don't change dramatically. Just try and edge yourself towards the middle ground, I suppose is the best way I can describe it. Don't go crazy, don't go, because this student manipulated the system and got through, I'm going to add some more sub-rules, just gently. Any other comments? Yeah, go.
Yeah, I remember one scenario happened when I was in a grad. We have that lecturer who, he's not performing well as a lecturer in the college, and he knows this is the last semester for him in the school, so they will end his
yes, contract
or something. So I remember the final exam. He gave us final message before he left. So it's very difficult exam, something out of the lecture, Then after, so most of the student is in range of 55, 56, something around.
Yep.
And there was a board meeting in the school, and they decided what's the highest score that student need to pass. So they find one student needs 7 marks to reach 60.
Yes.
So they give 7 marks to all the students in the unit.
Yep.
So they pass.
Yep. Look, yes, I've been on the how do I repair this situation problem myself. I empathise with your dean. Now, we're not going to talk the number, but I have been in the situation Okay, it's a long time ago, so I can tell a story. I've been in the situation where in the sub-clauses it said you needed to pass every practical test through the course, through the years. It was a year, not a semester, through the year, as well as overall. And in March time, April, in April time, half the class didn't pass the little 5% practical. So this was one of my early years as being in charge of a dental school. So the people in charge of that discipline came down to the office and said, well, half this class hasn't passed this little 1 hour prac test, and because of this clause, we want them removed from the school now. Well, as I said to them, I'm just going through it in my head right now, as I said to them, and are you proposing to go to the Vice-Chancellor and explain that we're kicking out half the class in the 5th week of term? Clearly, those sorts of problems come up for leadership in schools. An angry academic on his way out decides to make the exam in Latin, or do something crazy. Those problems come up and we have to solve them. You can't. It's not true, is it? Let's be honest, it's not true that those sorts of people, that doesn't work. So pragmatic solutions like adding 6, I think I would have done it differently, but that's okay, we all have different perceptions. Sometimes you have to do that to address injustice, or be it an angry staff member or whatever it might be. Those things have to happen. In the case I've just told you about, fundamentally, no, we're not kicking out half the class 6 weeks into the course when they've got 26 weeks or 24 weeks to go. It's not going to happen. So work a solution out around it. Remediation was the solution. You have to give some better training. There's no way half a class could fail. So yeah, no, that happens. And there will be...
Then they must have reviewed the exam. So as a board of the school, they must have, if there is an issue like this,
Yes.
of course students will escalate the issue to them.
Yes.
And they know that the member in the school is
Yes.
going out, and they know his history there,
Yes.
and everything. They must have reviewed the exam and look for the question.
Be preventive, is what you're saying. Instead of waiting till afterwards, why didn't they intervene earlier? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, maybe this
Yeah.
is a solution. But once it's happened, they have looked for an exam.
Yes.
After marking and everything.
Yes.
And they realize
Yes.
something in the exam is not correct.
Yes. And have to address it.
Exactly.
That's why we have a board. The board is a secondary check on me as an academic on my performance. You can't have things like that going through. And let's be clear, it wouldn't last a court appeal. You would be told to go back and look again. So, yeah. Now, I recognise your upsetness about 6 being a big number. Yes, it is a big number. I would have personally addressed it differently. I would have probably done a revised assessment or something, but I can empathise with your boss, or the boss of that school at the time. I can imagine he probably has some of what I've got up here from that too.
Mark, what do you think about the supplementary test?
Supplementaries.
Yeah. For those who
Yes, fail. Yes.
Or even the considered pass.
Or
Considered pass as well.
a conceded pass. Yeah. Well, firstly, you notice conceded pass is something I use. Yes, is the answer to conceded pass. The infamous 48s and whatever, when they've got other higher scores. I go back to my word I've written a lot of times on these slides, be generous. I use conceded pass. Supplementaries, really nice question. Sort of gone out of favour a little. I'm not sure this university even does them anymore. I'd have to check the rules.
I think the bachelors, they do that. The
Yes.
bachelor students,
I think they use them when it's last unit for the student.
That's right. There's some tricky thing like that. That's correct. You're
One
right.
of my friends, he does that.
Yes, but it's not universal anymore. Yes. So I think they're sort of, in general terms, heading out. I've used them. I'm not uncomfortable with them. We used to have like a cut-off. You had to get above 42 or 3 or something to be eligible, some number to be eligible for a supplementary. It couldn't be like you got 12%, right, I'll just go and do the sup. No. I'm not uncomfortable because it goes back to my comment from before about it's 1 3-hour event on a given day, which I find as written exams a very tenuous scheme of assessment. So I'm not too uncomfortable with supplementaries. Logistically, gets very complicated because you've got re-enrolment in the following year, or you've got registration with a board or something like that. So it gets complicated. I think that's probably why they've sort of headed out. One more thing I need to talk about, that is being unwell or unable to sit your assessment. Becoming extremely common. There is another tendency for an academic to not believe. I've heard every excuse. How many times has the dog been sick? Whatever it might be. There's a tendency to become hardened to the compassion of illness for students and exams. It's an enormous growing scene. In fact, I would say I would have a quarter of every assessment, a quarter of the candidates sitting every assessment would have some special consideration of some type. So it makes it extremely complicated. For example, I told you about those musical chairs style practicals. Some students require double the amount of time per chair. So have a think about the logistical problem of that. You can't actually run them at the same time as the others because they would bump into the next, whatever, make a mess of the system. So you have to be ready for that. You have to plan for that. So what I do now is as I prepare an exam, I always prepare 2.5 exams, have 2 ready and probably a third at hand. Just because I know I'm going to have to run some separate ones for deferred and absenteeism, illness, etc. I'm going to sound really old now. In my day, that just didn't happen. Even if you had the worst flu that you've ever had in your life, you turned up for your exam. Well, those days are gone. So just be prepared for that. Make sure you have a second exam ready. Why I say that is because exams often happen before you go on holidays. You get the exam, then you mark it, and then you go on holidays. Fairly common across the world. As a leader of programs, there's nothing worse than me trying to hunt you down on a beach in Bali or something. Please, could you get me some exam questions because we've got this deferred and you went on holidays, didn't leave me exam questions to look after them. It's a university nightmare. So be a good academic, prepare a set of questions and have them ready for doing a deferred exam. And that raised for me one more thing. Academics get sick too. So, or things happen. So we always have a rule. Some of you who have met Esty, my colleague, always have an academic buddy. Your friend who's an academic, and always share your materials with them and they share it with you, and you have a pact that if something happens to me, you will open the envelope and move forward with whatever I've left behind, or I will open the envelope and leave whatever behind. It's going to happen one day. I'm going to tell you a very confronting story. At the beginning of the pandemic, I'm on one of the senior health department committees, and the very high-ranking official came on to the first Zoom meeting we had back in March last year, and said, I want to make sure that all of you have organised a buddy for this committee because there's a risk some of you may die. It's the most confronting meeting I've ever been to look at it like that and go, okay, yeah, all right, fair enough, I'll have a buddy that I will keep prepped that if I'm not here, they can take over. So please, highly recommend that. When you start being an academic, from now on, you find an academic buddy who holds the exam questions, who holds all the prac questions, a duplicate copy like you have, who knows what your exam is like, who knows what students are coming, who, if you were sick in bed, you could write out a little key and they could do the marking if they had to. Have an academic buddy. Really important, wherever you go. Now, I had one more thing on the academic buddy stuff. Oh, yes. When you start to be a unit subject coordinator, looking after the subject and managing all the other things, don't ever do that on your own. I don't know about your institutions, we'll ask in a minute, but now I refuse to be a unit coordinator without a co-coordinator. Just as I refuse to be a PhD supervisor without some co-supervisors. What happens? What happens if I get sick? I want my students to have continuity. So don't be a lone academic. Those days are gone. Be a joint coordinator, run it jointly, so if one of you are sick, the other one can take over. If one of you decide that you don't like Perth weather, I'm going to go and live in Bali or whatever you decide to do, you leave, someone else will have the knowledge to keep it running. Now, I find some people get confronted by that for a couple of reasons. Some people have the mentality that if I let someone else know about my unit, they might steal it from me and I might lose my job because they'll know what to do and then I'll be gone. Well, if that happens in your institution, it was a good place to leave anyway. That's not professional. So, no. Find someone you have trust in and work with them as a co. So don't do that. And it also, I don't want to share with someone else where I make mistakes. That's a common thing too. You know, we all make mistakes, but we don't want to sort of go to our best friend and go, oh, I just handed out an assessment and it only adds up to 96. It doesn't add up to 100. What a deal am I? We don't like doing that. You have to overcome that and just acknowledge that both of you are going to make mistakes, and we'll sit and share a cup of tea and a laugh together at our mistakes together. So please, really important, an academic buddy who can look after your assessments when they happen, or look after your teaching, or even if it's just, and I had it 6 weeks back when I was sick the first time, Esty, could you just tell the students that I just can't even get to my computer to say I'm sorry I can't be there today? Just someone who'll kick in when the time is needed. An academic buddy and a coordinating buddy. Often the same person, but make a deal. Now, what happens? Tell me, do you have co-coordinators in courses? Everyone's silent. I think the answer is no. Is that what I'm sensing here?
I think it's not that easy because units, when they set up new units here, that those units should go through a committee in each department, and they decide what are the things that are being taught in that unit, or will be
Yes.
taught in that unit, and things like that.
Yes.
So the role of course coordinator is just, I think basically in our university it's like correcting, marking and do this stuff, right?
Logistics.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But what if you were sick? What if you got shingles and had to have a month off?
You can just give the department notice that you're not coming that day and they'll figure it out.
But what if you were sick for a month?
Who guys are teaching the unit?
What, shout?
Yeah, I was telling you who's going to teach the unit till you get back.
Yes. Who's going to teach your unit till you get back?
They will find out someone to do that.
They will find someone. Okay. That's it. You know what I think it is? It's a much more vertical downward structural arrangement.
Yeah.
Whereas I think maybe my experiences are much more horizontal in the sense of if I'm sick, sort it out yourself, Mark. I don't want to hear about it. You know, and that's clearly not, you're smiling at me now because that's clearly not how your organisation would operate. Whereas here I would almost have a professional mandate to find someone to look after the gap that I've left or adjust. You know, with one of my teaching courses, I said, hey, listen, we'll have a week off and then I'll do a double the following week or whatever it was. But that wouldn't occur. Is that right? No. Okay. Anyway, so I you know what? Actually, it's a good thing anyway, I think, to have a buddy, just someone you can rest on if you need to. Cool.
Record the lecture in case.
Yes, of course. You can nowadays with video lectures and things. That's easy, isn't it? It's and in fact that's what I did for one 6 weeks ago. I just got out of bed, propped myself on the couch, and recorded the lecture and put it up. So yes, you can certainly do that now. Any other questions or comments?
Just another question about the average of students who's fair. Which the average of students who are acceptable?
Average would I feel comfortable with for a class group? And let's assume the class group's about 50 students, because I'm used to that now, you know. You just get used to a number. You know, that's so hard because it depends on the discipline. You know, if I'm teaching research methodology stuff to postgraduate master's level students, which is that little slither of capacity at the top there, I would go an average in the early 70s, mid 70s for that group. But if I was teaching dental students anatomy, undergraduate level dental students, I would probably look in the mid 60s. With the fellowship students, I can tell you the number of the fellowship students, it's the late 60s, early 70s, just in there. The next question that comes up is, Mark, if you were normally curve distributing? See, I don't even know the name. If you were curve distributing, what would you expect to see in a curve? The fellowship program's a good thing because it's a nice sample size of 150 odd candidates. I'd usually expect 10% to either be doing a supplementary, shall we call it, or redoing the whole thing, 10%, and I'd usually expect 10% to be in the distinction, high distinction, the high distinction piece, the peak little group. So I'd probably have 10s on each end. But remember, that's an elite group of students. So yeah, I think as a general rule, if you wanted me to put my finger on one number, 65 would be my general rule, but I'd flex up for senior students in practical stuff and probably flex a whisk, well, not too much down on undergraduates. Is that, Colin, tell me, would that be consistent with home? Oh, it's different because you have a 60 pass. So what would be the average?
Maybe, I think between 70 to 80.
Yeah, okay, that's cool. That would be about this, you just jinker the whole thing, the curve up a bit.
I think the marking system in my country is a little bit different than Australia, because here, for example, 80 to 100 HD, but
Yeah.
we don't have that. We have A and A plus and B.
Yeah. You have more graduations in it. Yeah, I'm not.
It's like the American system.
Yeah, can I say, when you're going to record me, Vice Chancellor's going to shoot me for this, but I'm not so keen on the broad brush category. I like a bit of graduation too. There's a bit of American in me there somewhere. I think students like it too, to be honest. I think, although, the more boundaries you put, the more argument about boundary edges you get. So, you can argue both ways in this story. I don't like those edge arguments. As you've probably gathered, I would rather be generous and get over the boundaries, because I just don't want the argument of how accurate am I at 2 decimal points. But I like, in fact, in the college process, we had commendation was the highest rank, let's say, and about 20% of people got commendation. And just in the last few years, the team of us got together and said, we'll have commendation with distinction. But added another band right at the top for just the 10 super top people, really because for them it looks good on their CV, and they can celebrate the achievement. So we just added a band at the top. So we didn't spread all the bands out, we just added an elite band. And I think that's probably a factor of mark inflation, if there's such a word. I think over time marks have slowly jinkered up the curve, not necessarily because generations are smarter than the generations before. I think it's just a natural tendency to jinker up. And so we added one band at the top. Cool. What I'll do is those 3 scenarios I put up, I will actually send them around, and please have a go. Have a think about what you would do for assessment in each of those scenarios, and drop me back a line. Tell me what you do. There's no wrong or right. This is not an exam, but and I'll give you. In fact, what we'll do is we'll share them as an email to everyone, so everyone can see what everyone's done, and I'll make some comment back. We can just keep a conversation going around those 3 scenarios, because what I've tried to do with them is actually make them quite different in a sense, with different parameters in them. So yeah, have a go at that. I also want to say, please, like my friends already know, there's no escape. I actually say I know where you live. So please feel free anytime you like to write us a note and go, hey, what about this? Or, I've got the problem of adding 6 or not. All those sorts of questions and things. Really happy to support you anytime you want support in the future with what you do and things, your academic careers. I think that's something I was very lucky. I was gifted a lovely person who helped me when I first started. So very happy to help as you get going with your academic careers. And you know, I appreciate you coming for this series because it's the first time we've done it. Moss and I were just chatting out before we started today that we got some great ideas to make it really good and heaps better from the learnings we've got from this series. Sometimes people take that the wrong way and go, oh bugger, I wished I'd come to the one in 3 years' time. But no, you guys be happy that you were the first to tweak this along. So I really appreciate you coming along. And certainly we're going to do some online stuff. So very happy, you know, when the online material comes as the first group, we'll make sure you all get that as well because it'll be a bit more posher than what we've done here. So thanks guys for coming, really appreciate it. And I hope I've added something to your journey. Thank you.